Hello, hello, and hello once again, everybody. This week's Working Class Australia Live, number 28. Well, what a last week or so. Obviously, everything's changing a little bit here with the COVID-19. I'm now allowed out and about. I don't have to self-isolate anymore. That's been a good thing. Certainly been getting around, having a look at the places like I'm supposed to be doing while I'm enjoying my annual leave. It's been very interesting as well around the world, what's in relation to what's been happening in light of the Capitol Hill riot and Donald Trump. Obviously, you might have actually saw Caleb Walpin's speech last week, which I will get into that in a minute. And I think actually I just want to talk a little bit about the influence of Trumpism here in Australia, or the influence of Donald Trump, or the following he has here, especially amongst working class people here in Australia too. I've seen comments on Facebook throughout the week in relation to this, and I think it's very important we discuss it. And one reason why working class people here in this country looked at Donald Trump as well, and what he actually stood for. And the main thing, the primary thing that working class people actually saw in was economic. And the same thing, similar to the United States here, we've lost a lot of manufacturing that went offshore. We've seen a whole damn regional towns but nearly shut down. All we see is crime, drug and alcohol addiction, and yes, and people foreclosing as well. So when Donald Trump a few years ago said he was going to rip up the TPP, he wanted to bring manufacturing back, workers here were actually had their ears pricked up as well. He said, well, and obviously a lot of them had followed it. They didn't follow it because of his lambastic, obnoxious views on things. He basically came down to being what's primary. And I think working class people, and myself included, were sick and tired of insecure work. We were sick and tired of our unions crushed. We're sick and tired of low-paying jobs, poverty. People basically 3 to 4 paychecks away from literal poverty here in Australia, and it's growing as well. COVID-19 is certainly exposed Australia in the sense we're so largely now dependent on imports. And why aren't we manufacturing stuff here again? And the amazing, also important thing as well, I think what a lot of working class people are, they're angry. They are angry. I am too. I'm over it when you've got people that work high up in these companies and governments just smiling away. We're talking about competition and free trade like if it's anything beneficial to us at all. It's been nothing. And now we're obviously now in this trade war with China. It's not doing us good either. And just recently, the week before, I received a phone call from a particular company. They had to make their they're announcing redundancies. It's a company that makes tin cans for the powdered milk and baby formula. And we found out the reason being is because there's escalating trade war with China. And in my previous videos, I actually warned about this and said we're going to pay for this as well. And it won't be wealthy people, it'll be working class Australians. And where this factory is, I want to point out, it's only a small town, and it's going to be devastating. People are devastated about this. It was a company over 10 years ago, I think around 15 years ago, well over 100 more people. Now guess what's going to be reduced down to? Only a small skeleton crew. I think there's going to be at least a dozen left there now, both on production line and in management. That's just how badly this whole situation's, the situation the economy's going, and we are going to cop it here big time economically. They're going on about further stimulus package, and it's interesting about Biden's 1.9 trillion stimulus. I don't know if that's going to be any good, because reality isn't, in the end of the day, the American working class will be paying for that in the long term. Here in Australia, obviously we get promised these things with these gas-led recoveries and everything else, but really kind of comes down, it's just relying on the primary resource sector. It's not actually thinking about developing a strong economic foundation here for this country, which would be a manufacturing base. So we're obviously out of this. From what we saw, what happened at Capitol Hill was a lot of anger. And majority of people that turned up that didn't storm the Capitol, they were very angry people, and non-working class people have seen the same things as similar to us. Actually, it's worse in America, where they don't even have clean drinking water, not in just some towns, but some cities. It's contaminated, roads are ripped up, whole neighbourhoods have either been bulldozed or they're just completely bombed, looks like a bomb site. And you think these were once good, prosperous cities, good, prosperous towns, regional, remote areas, that all gone because of the last 40 years of having free neoliberal, conservative policies shoved down our throats, and we have to accept we've got to be tightening up the belt and having everything taken off us as well. We had good paying union jobs like America do. We had them here. When it's interesting when economists talk about high paying jobs. Well, they were actually union jobs, union hard fought wages and conditions paying. That's what it was. And they don't mention the term. That they think it was just going to be the magical arm of the market. The so-called magical arm that we seems to consistently hear through the media that will provide that. And if no one can see through that, I don't know what I've really got to say to you about that. We can clearly see through it's completely false. So this is where we are in a rut for Australia. So what did Trumpism mean? I mean, obviously for us, for a lot of working class people, not for me, I saw right through him. I knew from years ago, I knew Trump was all about Trump. I would not trust a billionaire as far as I can throw them. That is in the end of the day. But he did appeal to a lot of the broad masses of working people, working families in the US, hoping there's some sort of beacon of hope. And I think it's a good time we analyse the whole situation from our point of view, especially here in Australia, what we need to do moving forward as well. And I think there's also, when someone mentioned about, that's such an American thing, and we should look to here. Yes, that's right. But the fact is, there's also that big US imperial influence and cultural influence into our society here as well. The US plays a big role in our politics here in Australia. You nearly hear it every day on the news. Something about the US, be something about the president, or the president-elect, or be something about someone else in the US government, or something about US overseas, and also US involvement in our politics, which, on that note, I find it a bit rich when they're going on about Chinese influence into our politics, as when the US has been the main perpetrator for the last God knows how many years into our politics and our internal affairs. They're the worst offender. But obviously that's not mentioned as well. You won't hear that even through mainstream media such as the ABC and SBS. They will definitely not touch on that as well. So this is where we're at the moment. And I think actually we need to have this discussion, this debate. And what we need to do is grab hold of our own affairs again, get back control of our own affairs and our own direction, what we need to do moving forward. I was having a discussion probably about 2 days ago, maybe 3 days ago, with someone over the phone, a comrade in Sydney there, and a big shout out to him, Comrade Nate. If you are watching this, big hello. And interesting, we're talking about nationalisation of industries. And what I find, it was a really good discussion how we went about it. Hi, Arctic, welcome aboard. I just want to actually raise something about nationalisation. I think a lot of people have got some confused ideas what it means is just taking over it. Yes, it'd be in public ownership, government ownership, but we really should have a look at what type of nationalisation. Do we want a government entity that's corporatised, that's still there for the profit motive, or do we want a proper utilities or resources that are directed for the public good? It's something that just to keep our eye on, because over the years, a lot of government utilities, be it railways, be it any form of transport, communications, were first corporatised before they were sold off into the private sector. And I think we need to have a good consideration if we want to get control of our own affairs again, what sort of nationalisations we're going to be talking about. And I think that's something that's worthwhile. We need to have a thorough think through and a thorough discussion, because a lot of people just say nationalisation with it being divorced from what it actually means. So, for example, if we're talking about, which would be very all dear to our arts here, is the nationalisation of all our raw resources, our minerals, our oil and gas, which would actually help guarantee our economic security and sovereignty as well, and bring that back under control, our own control, away from the likes of the US multinationals, Japanese multinationals, British multinationals, all types of multinationals, right? It gets us back under that control. And I think it's something worthwhile where how that money, the revenue that's raised through that, how it's going to be used, and how it's going to help develop us further. And that's vitally important. I've been around many left groups over the years, all sorts of groups. I won't just say left groups. I think all sorts of groups. And then they're all keen, they say nationalise this, nationalise that. Okay, great, but how? And I think that's got to be a very big important thing we need to improve. Now, for us as well, with the influence of US policy here in Australia, I know for a fact if there's been an attempt by government here to try and do that, the US consulate will be right on the phone to the director of the Prime Minister's office, basically asking the question, what are you doing? The corporations are not very pleased. And obviously there'll be actual direct cables there from Washington, be from Wall Street, and also London as well, what's going on, and they'll be trying to do whatever they can to upstage the particular governments at the time. Last time they actually did that was under the Whitlam government. Obviously, Whitlam had or not just him personally, but the government had obviously to buy back the farm. They wanted to nationalise a lot of key industries, especially the mineral sector. They wanted it was quite a grand nation building scheme they wanted to develop through that. Obviously, there was also Whitlam wanted to actually steer Australia into its own independent course. That didn't run well with Washington whatsoever. And then, of course, obviously, we had the coup in 1975, November 11th, 1975, when the Governor-General, John Kerr, sacked the Whitlam government with the blessing of both the Crown and the US government as well at the time. There was a lot of nasty play behind that. But one of the key things of that government, I want to nationalise a lot of our primary resources as well. Explain that we're not a quarry, we're not a hole in the ground, we're not a farm. We want to develop our own nation. But yeah, and certainly right, Arctic. I mean, there's certainly a lot we need to discuss on that as well. I think when I'm going back to without trying to jump all over the place, going back to what I mentioned about Trump and why a lot of working class people that saw that, because deep down that's what they yearn. They yearn for the nationalisation. They want to get control of their own affairs. And when they hear someone like Trump saying they want to rip up the TPP, which that Trans-Pacific Partnership, I'm going to swear here, what a fucking crock of shit that was. I mean, we lost a lot. We lost a lot of jobs through that as well. It went offshore. Now, I'm not trying to pay out China. I mean, I'm glad China's racing ahead, developing its own economy and racing with this Belt and Road Initiative and raising its population out of poverty, and they've been achieving a lot of things milestone, and I'll take my hats off for it. But here in Australia, and I think, and I'll get down to this as well, with a lot of the anti-China rhetoric, and it's not a lot of working class people feel a lot of anti-China as well. It's because a lot of we're actually a lot worse off now than what we were in the past. So the thing is, I'm all for other countries to develop themselves, but you don't do it to the detriment of your own working class in your own country. And I think we've got to have that serious talk. Like I've said, China's not our enemy. There's no way we could afford to actually be in any type of conflict with China. We'd just lose completely. But what I would be saying is, I think what we do need to do is hold our own governments back to account again and start putting the blame back onto the bosses here, back onto all employers here, back onto the parasite class, back onto the respective parties and that have held government. And look, I'm not just saying just the Liberal National governments or that Liberal National Party. The Labor Party's been just as complicit, if not even more so, for the last 40 years in this. Basically, selling us out completely, all whole industries going offshore. And look, I'll give you an example. I was it would have been just around about 2008. I was working in an engineering company back over in Perth in Western Australia. There, I won't mention the name for obvious reasons, but here we were, and we were actually picking up prior to the whole global, what they call the global financial crisis, which really deep down was the crisis of overproduction. I worked as a boilermaker, and we were picking up a lot of work prior to all that. And next thing you know, there was just no work at all. And we saw one job that was half completed being sent, just taken up, like unloaded on a truck, no question, not explaining the reasons why. And guess where it went? It went over to Bhutan to be finished up. Why? Because what they use these free trade agreements and TPPs, whatever you want to call them. All that work just went completely offshore like that. I saw it with my own very eyes. It was depressing. And we were left sort of twiddling our arms. We had to, for about 2 months there, we had to reduce our work week with loss of pay. It wasn't an actual genuine shorter hours campaign. There was just nothing. We had to take that because we're in a vulnerable situation that we could lose our jobs. And it was a bit painful for us financially as well. But the thing is, it was us that were copying it. It wasn't the bosses, it wasn't the governments, it wasn't any of the multinationals, it wasn't the banks. Anyway, it was us working class people. So when you see that happen with your own eyes, that all this equipment, manufacturing goods that thrown onto the back of a truck or onto a train off the port to be sent overseas, and then it all happens over there in the country because the multinationals can find cheaper sources of labour. You can see the resentment that builds up here, the anger and the frustration, especially when whole working families here have got massive mortgages to pay off. I mean, if you default, if you miss a mortgage payment, I think in 3 months in a row, I think the banks just come here in Australia, actually move in very quickly to default and seize your home. The plaintiffs will come around and have you evicted. And then it's been happening a lot and it's been increasing, especially since 2008 here in Australia as well. So you can see the anger and the bitterness about that amongst working class people. So when Trump came along in 2016 with his bombastic, flamboyant style, what happened? And why? And then the reason why it appealed, when he actually turned around and said, "You're going to get manufacturing back here into a US," that appealed to a lot of working class people, right through the rust belts of the US, in the regional areas of the US in the South. People there would think, well, yeah. And when he said the TPP was a dumb idea, actually, I did agree to that. It was a dumb idea. That was devastating. And, what he did. And actually, for working class people here too, when he did become president, there was a discussion between him and our then Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. Well, it wasn't our Prime Minister, he was the Prime Minister for big business, basically saying that Australian steel supply to the US was guaranteed, and a couple of other guarantees in that which actually would secure a lot of working class jobs here in Australia too. So working class people saw a benefit to it. As I said, we've seen everything, the heart and soul. We've seen our unions smashed, we've seen our industry smashed, we've seen everything sold off by parasites, and those parasites representing the parasite class as well. And you see, we're all with a big smiley face that we must go for this, we must do that, and telling us we all have to tighten our belts, and for the free trade economy, world market is the one we must abide by, and it's all part of the rules. Well, what rules? And always when I've actually explained this to, when they're talking about free trade, which class does it always benefit? And it's never benefit for us. When they're saying, oh, we're so more enriched now these days. Well, no. Well, if we were so far enriched, why do whole working families are trying to make ends meet and struggle? And if they miss, as I said, about 3 mortgage payments, the banks move in. If we're supposed to be so enriched through all this, well, then why are we having these discussions now? No, we're not benefiting at all. And similar to what's happening in the US, I'm seeing it here too, in this country. And when I get a phone call like that, I did the other day, where to say, look, we're going to have some mass redundancies here at this particular tin can plant, and in small little regional town. And I was not in a particularly good mood because I had to just go and self-isolate, and that it was not a great start for 2021. You could just imagine how upset I was too, along with those workers there. I will be, when I'm actually returning from annual leave at the end of the month, I will be definitely catching up with all the workers up there as well. But it certainly, when you hit something like that, it hits home very quickly, and especially for regional Australia, it really does hit home. And because in Australia here, we have got a massive drug and alcohol problem. I've got towns like Shepparton, which is a major food production, manufacturing and food production city or town. It's not far from here. It's probably just over an hour away from here, hour and a half at the very most. And I see it's got a massive drug problem. Crystal meth's huge here in this country, and it devastates not just the user, but his whole family, his community, and the towns as well. It's devastating because people have got no home. They just, where do they turn to? So they self-medicate, obviously. Of course, alcohol consumption as well is just as rife. So we're not benefiting from this as well, one little bit. And so when we're talking about, the influence, we're talking about what we should be focused here. Those comrades said that certainly, I totally agree with that. But also understand too the influence that the whole state of affairs is what's been happening in the US. Why it was important that we have a look at this and the influence of Trumpism here in Australia. And it actually too, see, there's a reflection in the politics here. If you look at every federal election or even state election, it's very, very US style now. I'm not kidding you. The Liberal Party and Liberal National Party started that off, and it's very, very, very influenced how they run it. Candidates now, it's even a lot of candidates are a lot more monitored through the US consulate here. Obviously, Washington's kept up to date, and obviously when if it's the returning Prime Minister or if it's the new one, they obviously get the phone call from the consulate the next day if they announce they've been successful at the election. So it certainly has a primary big issue here. Now, I'm only when I talked about nationalisation a little bit further, that is one step forward. That's one thing we can look at. And when I was actually speaking to the comrade Nate the other day, it was interesting because we're talking, well, how are we going to achieve a lot of things? How are we going to move forward? And I think we need, let's have a good analysis. The working class is not in a position to take the system on. It's in a weakened state at the moment. It's divided, and we need to get that united. And plus, a lot of the working class are not confident in taking the system. So we need to start looking at little wins first. What can we actually achieve in the meantime to build up, quantitative or qualitative change? How are we going to achieve that? And this is it's something I've been thinking about for the last 48 hours. I think, okay, we need to actually look, how are we going to organise it? Let's look at smaller achievable goals first so we can build up to a bigger one. How are we going to achieve that? And that's part of what we call a strategy. And we can use that dialectical formula to it, into a quantitative to a qualitative change for us in Australia. So that's quite important. I think we're going to need to have that discussion. And I don't want to just want to keep it within all us comrades. These videos are actually addressed out to working class people too. So for those working class people, I want you to, what I want to is, okay, we're in a situation here in Australia. What do we need to do moving forward? Let's not just look at hopefully some messiah comes along and saves us. That's not going to happen. Let's look back to us as workers. What can we do within our neighbourhoods, our workplace, after work, wherever, and how are we going to move forward? I mean, we need to have everyone's input in this moving forward. And because we are angry, I share that anger with you as well. I'm angry as well, what's been going on in life. I mean, upset to see what happens with job losses and everything that's been taken to us, everything that's dear to us here in Australia as well. I think it's basically, what's dear to us, and we need to hang on to that. But we need to also, how are we going to move forward as well, and how are we going to take back our affairs? I mean, it's important too that we run working class people in elections. I'm not talking about lawyers and people who think they represent working class people and people, not shiny people straight out of university claiming that they represent us, which they do not, and they don't know what it's like to live like we do. We need to have the general people on. I think you'd like working class people, and then just be blue collar. I'm also meaning the white collar side as well. Regardless of where you work, you could be a nurse, you could be a teacher, but you could also be from a trade background like I am, or you can be a truck driver or a train driver, whatever. You can be a labourer, you can be a farm worker, you can be a farmer yourself. This is what we need to have people, and you can be a scientist and an engineer. We certainly need them as well, and we do need to. Because I'd rather have those type of people in Parliament than lawyers and people with business degrees and some degree in some economic thing and economic, degrees in arts. What the fuck they're? Why do we need all that for? What would they know about running an economy? When you got a prime minister like what we got, Scott Morrison, he's known as Scotty for marketing, who's failed at everything he's touched. Why the hell would we want anyone like that as well? And how can we have them trying to represent the Australian population? They don't know what it's like. They've had it good for all their lives, and when them to try and turn around and be sympathetic to our lot, what a joke that is. So we do need to actually have those considerations, and I think we should be looking at running at all three levels of government as well, or local, state, and federal. And we do need to run that. I mean, voting is not just the be-all and end-all. If it was, we'd be having a completely different conversation, but we know that's not. But it's important that we do, so we can also utilise these elections to get our voice out further. We just recently did this in Victoria last year with the local government elections, when we had 20 union candidates, running in elections. I mean, 3 of them got that. One of them was a shop steward of ours with the union I'm in, at Maryborough City Council. And well done to him. And Wayne's out there somewhere. If he comes across, there's a big shout out to Wayne too. I've got to catch up with you when I get back in February. Anyway, I think that's important. It's important that we got our voices out there. It's a start. It might be a little win. It might be something small at the moment, but something small turns into something big. A snowflake starts an avalanche. A little seed turns into a big oak tree. It's got to start that again. And I think we do have to do that as well. And the most important thing too, I know, look, and a lot of workers have got a lot of grudges towards the union movement here, and which is understandable. There's a lot of things, and a lot of crap things have happened over the years. I understand that. And I think sometimes as well, we need to take that back as well. I mean, unions are right for a takeover, if I want to put it that way. Workers do need to get back in there and turn them back into rank and file organisations. We've actually, in our union I'm here in Victoria, we've got a very good leadership, excellent leadership. It's rank and file all the way. The officials actually come from the shop floor. They're from the rank and file. They're not straight out of another university. They're not. They actually are from the rank and file, so they actually know what it's like to get struggle. They're struggle trying to make ends meet. You've got that, and like myself, I'm from the rank and file as well. So it's important that we're moving forward there. But we're only one branch of a bigger union, so I mean but that's important that we do encourage it. And I will always encourage all workers on your respective union. I know they're not in a great shape. I get that. All unions are not. We've got big internal problems at the moment here for the movement there as well. And in the last, not the last video, I think the one before that, I went off my brain about there's a couple of senior officials trying to break up a big union there just because they are their own political agenda and all the colluding they've been doing behind closed doors without rank and file knowledge. That I just thought, class traitor for starters. I mean. And if anyone, a senior official, does act that way, they should be called out. But anyway, that's I threw my 10 cents worth in there, and I had to, because it's just such the worst time to do it. We're going to be under a big attack this year. We know it. We're always under attack, but it's going to get worse for us as well. So let's it wasn't just talk about poor time, talk about rampant right opportunism that was as well. So I won't go into that. It's going to wind up. I'll just wind up getting nowhere with it. So at the moment, but yeah, look, we do need to have a look at these things. And for those years, and the US comrades here as well, I think we need to have these discussions and actually link up. Let's link our struggles up, because we're an international. The working class is international, and we've got to look at how we can actually actively support each other in each other's countries. So it doesn't actually matter if you're in Australia or the US, it could be anywhere around the world, how we're going to be actively supporting each other as well. And I think that's vitally important to build that practical stuff up on the ground. But little wins first to a bigger win. And I think if I've got the answer, what type of an issue we need to look at the moment, there's multitudes of ones. Have a look at the material conditions of your own respective areas, your localities, what you can do from there on, and what's vitally important, what's primary at the moment, what's on the tops of everyone's lips as well. So I think it's something we need to drum that conversation up amongst everyone. Look, I get bombarded with questions about it. Look, I'm not. I'm only putting some examples there forward too at the moment. If you don't wish to use them, that's fine by me as well. But it's important. It's got to be a collective discussion. It's got to be a collective decision, and good old collective taking it out as well, carrying out what we've got to do. Going back actually too about the state of affairs in the US and affecting us here, obviously. We all know about Trump being impeached. We all know about what's all the security crackdown around Capitol Hill, what's happening for Biden's inauguration. Look, like I've said, actually, for one thing, for the comrades over there, I made a mention in Caleb's talk this morning, just in a super chat, just stay safe. I don't think, look, just going out there trying to, especially if there's some extreme right-wing groups out there mobilising, well, just be careful, just at the moment. Look, we've got a huge fight up against us. Yes, there's going to be a lot of anger and resentment in the US towards Biden as well and what's going on. But the most important thing, stay safe. We've got a bigger struggle up ahead of us, and we need it for the long term as well. But we'll see how that pans out. But I will emphasise this: what the more so the big concerning is their own basic civil liberties clamping down. Because I know for a fact is this, and I don't know if you there was little things, snippets of information from our federal government here, but they're looking very closely in the US and seeing how they, and obviously they will be watching how they clamp down on further civil liberties here in Australia as well. So we've just got to be a little bit aware and vigilant about that. I think we've just got to be also a bit clever too what we put up on social media at times. What I'm doing is I'll actually want people know where I stand anyway. There's a lot of other comrades out there, you've got to be a little bit careful. But it's just what I'm saying is not only are you going to have the door kicked in by armed police and you'll be taken away. What their lower capitalist class looking to do is, besides throwing you off social media platforms, but also looking at to affect your employment as well. Which is very important for everybody. Don't want to see anyone's employment being jeopardised for this. Just always be a little bit mindful. Always ask first before you may want to post something up, just in case, because they're monitoring everything now. What was really annoying, those of the synthetic left were laughing about all of these people being kicked off social media. That wasn't a laughing matter, because the government, the US government, didn't order Facebook and Twitter to do so, or Google to kick Parler off or whatever. I mean, some of those posts are outright obnoxious at times, and I don't agree with it. Well, what that actually gives them to do is the greater ability now, corporations themselves, to monitor us even further. And all they basically need to do, a respective employer or a current host employer might actually ring up Facebook, well, not ring up, but send them a message. Look, I need to get some information on this. Prospective employee or current employers want to, say, oh, okay, well, you're no longer required, or look, sorry, you weren't successful at this job, and you're wondering why it's harder and harder to get work. We've always got to be a little bit clever about that as well. But by all means, once again, as I said, just we'll be a bit careful how we're moving forward. We've been watched consistently. And look, I'm not trying to be Mr. Doom and Gloom and scare everybody, but I think we've just got to be a little bit mindful about that. Look, I've done talks about that before, about being careful what we put up on social media. But yeah, look, it is concerning. The crackdown on civil liberties, certainly these days, and the polarisation of our society. But one thing to ask yourself, why has this happened? Because you understand, let's look what's happening primary. This is a reflection of the systematic crisis of capitalism. Right, capitalism, it's the US, especially US imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. It's in crisis. It's now in decline, and what we're seeing here, this is the whole thing around Trump, and not just Trump personally, but of any others. What's been going on over there is the whole reflection of the systematic crisis, and we're seeing it around the world as well, and seeing it here in Australia. What's happening here? The politics didn't come first; it was the economics that came first. Now that came the politics. So we always look to understand what's happening around primarily. Caleb did a great discussion this morning, and so did Dust. Look, Dust, I do apologise. I was jumping back and forth you were both on at the same time, so I was just jumping back and forth. So I had to hear what you had to say, but I'll sit down and go through your video clearly later on. And just on that note too, myself and Dust James, for Working Class Revolts on tomorrow, I wasn't able to get a guest, but I couldn't get anyone for tomorrow. Honestly, I don't know, it was something about this weekend, but anyway, I couldn't get anyone, people I needed. Anyway, but on that, we're on the same time tomorrow. That'll be 12 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, and that'll be 8 p.m. on Eastern Standard Time, US. So that's Saturday night, and at 12 p.m. our time here on Sunday. So yeah, we're still the show. We'll continue with the show. It'll be a great discussion as well. But going back on some of the discussions been happening, what I've been seeing from the US, I think you look at it, you could actually see right through it. This is what's happening primarily on the ground. The whole economic base basically being shattered. And you can see this being reflected through the superstructure and through the politics at the time. And we can see that here in Australia. It's also, too, making the comparisons. I think it's good to make comparisons, not in the sense where, oh, well, it's worse in the US and it's here. No, look, no, don't go down that path. That's not being a comparison. It's actually what's happening over there is a lot of ways there's some certain polarisation happening in society as well. And you can see, and I've actually talked to workers from all backgrounds. There's all sorts of quite polarised views on things as well. And we've got a lot of work to do, a lot of work ahead of us as well. But most understand is we've got to keep focused on actually who the enemy is and actually organise people around the one common enemy, which is your ruling elite, aka your capitalist class. So I think I think we've got a few ideas and to move forward when we're talking about nationalisation. Well, we've got other things we can achieve as well. I think it's vitally important. We've got to learn a long road to go here. So that's just a summary up to summarise about the last week or two. Obviously, next week it's going to be interesting around inauguration around on the 20th and thereafter. But I think for us here, both us people, especially here in Australia, we do need to take all these things, observe what's going on as well, but how we're going to start rallying around there against a common enemy as well. Now, just on something different as well, I'm going to do a video of a book review. I know it's Caleb this morning, and thank you for giving me the permission to do so. All of us all the permission. I'm currently reading this at the moment. Kamala Harris and the Future of America by Caleb T. Maupin. That's how far I've got through, about halfway through. And I highly recommend the book. I'm going to do, once I fully read, I'm going to do a little book review on that as well. And I think it's something worthwhile to pick it up. Obviously, just go to Caleb Maupin's webpage. I put the links in below and the descriptions are below. The main link there for Caleb Maupin is his speech to the American workers or to all Trump supporters, all those Trump supporters earlier this week, and in a very good speech as well. That was really what was needed. It just shows you people like ourselves, the guys of us who call ourselves Marxists, Socialists, Communists, that's doing our job. That's what's supposed to be done. How we speak directly to all those workers, the ones that especially supported for Trump, and how we can rally around and move forward as well. So it's actually had some very, very, very interesting responses as well. There's been a lot of Trump supporters now actually watching Caleb Maupin the last two days, I've noticed, and actually making comments on that. Synthetic left, well, they're not happy about it, but we don't care. They've been exposed now for the last, God knows, months on end with what they really like, and no one really is paying much attention to them anymore. And I think it's quite important we need to do this, and that actually goes back to what Lenin actually had to say too: communism and infantile disorder. We have to actually get out there and want some more reactionary-minded workers. They're the reactionary-minded unions, everything else, and address to their concerns. What are their deep-down concerns? And what is it? Economic. It's economic concerns there, and they're worried about their own security. And this is where we need to actually step up to the mark. So that was really good. Actually, to me, that was a shot in the arm. It was very inspiring, very inspiring speech as well. Which will, maybe consider all other comrades. We should be actually doing something similar, sending out messages to all those workers that giving them important messages. Keep the language simple, keep it to the point. Don't need to go on long technical stuff. There's nowhere, and keep it relatively short. Don't need to go on. It could be just a 5 to 7 minute speech as well. So, and that way you can just hit home. That's what they need to hear. And obviously something and actually that is one of the achievable things we can do. How about we all start doing it? Not just one person, but everybody. And look, it's not a competition amongst ourselves. No one's going to be better than anyone else. How about we all start doing that and addressing it? I'll give you an example, even with myself and Dust James, when we're doing our videos, even both separately and when we do Working Class Revolt together. The most important thing is we actually want to address working class people. This is what the direction is to them. And look, is everything going to happen overnight? Things going to remarkably change overnight? Of course not. It's going to take time, but we do have to travel this road. We have to do our job, and that's what we're doing. because otherwise those who can sit around in little circles all the time, in little groups, and pontificate with self-righteousness and not connecting to the masses, well, they're not doing their job. The job is there to now directly address the workers. This is why I'm now doing it. I've told many people why I do these videos. Actually, I was inspired by all your comrades in the US when you're doing this, and I thought, why aren't we doing it here? Why aren't we building our own infrastructure? So basically, let's just get up and do it. That's what I did. I just got up and did it. Didn't need anyone to tell me to do it. I just told, well, I'm going to do it, and this is where we're at. This is live number 28 for Working Class Australia. And obviously, I've done some little short, quick videos as well. But we need to do this. We need to build our infrastructure. We need to build our community, but we also making sure these are all directed to the working families themselves, and addressing their concerns. Because there's going to be a lot of things happen this year, economically, and I've got some big concerns as well. Also, on one point, just before I go too far, we may have a federal election at the end of the year. We don't know yet, because the Morrison government, just for those who are trying not to confuse everyone overseas, but after September this year, Scott Morrison's got the ability to call a federal election. We'll see how that pans out too. So maybe a good discussion too. We could talk about running candidates in federal election. Vitally important, be good training for everybody to engage with the masses further. So there's these things we can do. Some practical things we can do, and it'd be good to go out and do door knocking, not just rely on Facebook and Twitter and just putting out comments all the time. Actually going out and door knocking and talking to whole working class communities, getting out and engaging with them. So for us in Australia, here's a perfect opportunity to do so. But even after election, it still gives us the opportunity to get out there amongst the masses and start talking as well. I mean, I've got a little bit of an advantage, yes, because I'm an organiser. I can go out and talk to workers at the workplace level. There's no problem with that. But mind you, I'm also limited with time and that. But with that way too, outside of work, we've got a little bit more time on our hands. We can actually engage. So there's just a few things I want to throw in there. I think we've got, for this year, I'm going to wrap it up very shortly, but we mean to do this live for the whole week. Obviously, next week I'll try and keep these in about the same time on Saturdays. I just did mine there late this afternoon. Only reason why there was other lives this morning, and I just couldn't marry it up. So I usually try to do it mine around about 10 o'clock in the morning. Some people said that's a bit too early. Look, I'm just trying, juggle it around. Any times, even if you can't watch it at this time, you can always follow it up later. So look, please share this video, please subscribe, please click the like button, share it far and wide, and I encourage everyone to jump on board and give each other support. I've also, in the descriptions below, I've clicked on Doug James's anti-imperialist America, and also Comrade Reese's page as well. We had him on the other day, and about 2 weeks ago, and he was fantastic to talk to. He did an excellent video on the history of the communist movement there in the UK. I recommend watching that. It's fantastic. So keep it up. We do need to support each other for those of us who are doing our lives. We'll look, put pen to paper, start coming up with things, start engaging with people. And also too, I encourage people to start writing their own articles. Maybe start running your own booklets, your own analysis as well. Because I watch some of these live chats, and there's quite a debates that go on in the comment sections at times. Some silly remarks, and that I'm not really particularly interested. Although I was having a bit of fun yesterday with 2 or 3 comrades were talking about beer. And I think Caleb was a little bit confused what we're going on about. It was just a little bit of fun there. But look, in the end of the day, Marxism itself, it's not a debating society. It's a guide to action. It's a tool to use. It's not a dogma. It's there to use how we move forward. And look, you can read to the, and I encourage reading. I encourage reading big time. I also encourage people to pick up a copy of this book. It's a really good book. It's actually addressed to working class people. And I think vitally important, it's like, know your stuff, but also to put it into practice by engaging with others out there. So I'm sorry to sound like a scratch record when I'm talking about this, but it's quite important. We keep reminding it as well. And also too, another thing we should be putting the demand here for Australia, for all us working class people, for all us working families, we should be demanding that, especially when there's federal elections coming up. We want a government of action that will fight for working families. We want a government of action not only fights for working families, it will mobilise workers to deal with climate change. We can deal with COVID properly, not with the ad hoc situation, just leave it up to the states, to deal with it. We can have a national plan around pandemics. We can actually start rebuilding Australia again. Actually, let's talk about building a new Australia, one that's really our own, that people of Australia here can be something to be proud of as well. There's nothing wrong with that. And one that we can develop our own independent course, our own peaceful relations with immediate neighbours and around the world. We don't have to be involved in military adventures at all. Why? What's it serve? It's not serving anything. The only class it serves is the bourgeoisie, I'll put it back into common term, the bosses, basically the employer class. That's all it is. It's capitalist class, multinationals. That's all that serves. So look, it actually allows us then we as working class people have control over our own affairs again. So that's a good one demand to have. We want a government of action that will fight for working families for here in Australia. And I think that will have resonate. Well, actually, I've mentioned that to a lot of workers out there, and it does resonate with them. Yes, we want something that'll stand up for us and implement policies that will benefit us, not for benefit the very few. So I think it's something worthwhile to campaign on out there. To rally around. We've got a huge task ahead of us. Look, there's been a lot of damage over the last 40 years. We've had 40 years, like I've stated, we've had 40 years of neoliberal policy shoved down our throats. That's really just left Australia devastated. Things are going to get a lot worse here economically, but we've also at the same time, beauty about something behind that, we've got the ability to get back ourselves organised both in and out of work, and we've got to come back with a common message to put forward to them, put forward to everybody, and for those too, our allies and everything else. All the support in the world, and how we're going to support ourselves internationally. Well, look, I'm going to leave it at that today. Just a little bit short, under an hour. I didn't want to talk for too long. And that's it. Once again, tune in tomorrow at 12 p.m. for all of us in Australia. It's Eastern Daylight Time. That will be 11 a.m. in Queensland, and I believe it will be 9 a.m. in the morning over Western Australia. So join in. We've got a big task ahead of us. It'd be good to address this out. And once again, I ask you to share this out, everyone. Let's get more workers on board. We do need to have that, and do need to have that engagement. And yes, join the union as well. Most important. And once again, I will see you if I don't see you tomorrow, I will see you next week, and I'll end it off as dare to struggle, you dare to win. If you don't fight, you lose. Workers of all countries, unite. Thank you.